Telecom rising, cloud at the edge. One of my favorite stories from Asia is in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong government, through the Metropolitan Transit Authority, actually delivers Wi-Fi on every single train. It used to be the complaints in Hong Kong that the #1 issue was the delay of the train, it was the problem with the train, it was overcrowding with the train. Last year, in 2016 to 2017, the #1 complaint to the Hong Kong transportation system was people couldn't get their application. No one could watch their soap opera, okay? As opposed to the Long Island Railroad, which doesn't even work. So the question is where are we going with this telecom rising cloud at the edge? And before I get going, I want to go down the group. We'll start with you, Eddie. Quick introduction, perspective just on the topic of telecom rising at the cloud and edge. Eddie first, please. We'll go to the end to Cole, and then I'm coming right back to you, Anthony, because you have a hard stop at 12:15. So please, Eddie first, intro and perspective on this question.
Sure. Eddie Schutter, and I'm head of foundation engineering at eBay, and formerly with AT&T. My perspective is that just about everything today, we're not really talking about mobile as an enabler anymore, but much of what mobile enhances or what the capabilities that are being delivered to the end client requires ubiquity of networking and also access to data that is stored. So key here is how do we make those two things come together where we can have that experience that we want the end user to have.
Great. Alan, please.
Sure. Alan Bock, Vice President Corporate Development and Strategy for Crown Castle. Relative newcomer to this show and to the whole data center space, so I'm probably the stupidest person on this panel, I'm sure. Crown Castle is at its heart is a cell tower company. So we have 40,000 cell towers that, and our whole business model is shared wireless infrastructure, trying to lower the costs of wireless deployments through sharing of assets. And about 6 years ago, we started to acquire Metro Fiber to support what is known as small cell. And so we now, pending the closing of our latest acquisition and towards the end of the year, we'll have one of the largest holdings of Metro Fiber outside of the CLEX. And so what we're concentrating on is trying to lower the cost through shared infrastructure for this move for the carriers out to the edge. We feel that in terms of buying infrastructure like generators and racks and air conditioner units, that's something that we can do. Again, it's about laying the foundation to it, and so we're trying to enable the move to the edge by lowering the overall cost of the deployment.
You know, I need to come back to something very quickly, Alan, and you said it. Right now, Crown is just behind the CLEX in the amount of fiber. That's stunning, and that's beautiful, and that shows a change. I mean, that really shows a change.
It's a massive change for us, yes.
Yeah, amazing. So let's move over, please. Cliff, if you could.
Sure. Cliff Kane, I'm the co-CEO of Cleareon Fiber Networks. We're a New York City-based metropolitan access and transport provider, so it's for people not familiar with the telecom industry, we help the big carriers get around our metro. We have recently invested in some data center assets because we are looking for ways to support densification, which is a word that has not been mentioned as far as I've heard at the conference yet. But that's really the densification of the wireless networks, which is the rollout of small cell and even distributed antenna systems inside of buildings. Our focus is primarily on carriers now, but we're shifting that with the acquisition of these data center assets to the enterprise market. And we see a need for small edge data centers where we can aggregate the traffic in a CRAN topology, which is where a number of buildings are fed back by fiber to a central place. And those data centers in turn are attached to our core network, so we can deliver wireline services and access to any kind of wireless services. So my perspective is from the carrier space, and we're building the foundations to be able to support densification in 5G.
Yeah, and as a fellow New Yorker, Cliff, I want to say thank you. Because Cliff and his company have done an incredible job of disrupting all of New York City. It's absolutely fantastic, both in pricing.
We're not alone with that, you know.
Pricing, service delivery, how Meet Me rooms, it is absolutely fantastic. And how the buildings themselves are looking at the customers as no longer the people paying the rent, but actually as somebody who needs to be in there. Thank you, Cliff. It's amazing. Anthony, over to you, please.
Yeah, Tony Rossabi, I'm Chief Revenue Officer for TierPoint. And clearly we're a data center provider, so obviously that's why we're here. But also, we play in the space of primarily in the enterprise space. We've spent roughly the last 7 years aggregating a number of mid to medium-sized data centers, and we've aggregated those, and now we have 40+ data centers across the U.S. Not only do we have data centers, we are a full suite of managed services, so complete security offering, private cloud, hybrid cloud. So I think that we have primarily been focusing on the enterprise, but we're obviously interested in getting into working with some of the carriers and many of the next generation service providers, as well as playing in the wireless space. To your question was really around how we're going to play in this space, and I think it actually, we are in some unique areas. We're not in all the major metros, although we do have facilities in the major metros. So I think as people continue to, or customers and clientele continue to move to the edge, I think TierPoint's well positioned to capture that business. One other point, if for those of you who read the Cowen briefings, Cowen had just released something that was directly about 5G and kind of where it's going with respect to the autonomous vehicles and a few others yesterday. So if you're interested, Cowen released it yesterday.
Great. Cole, I was just with you 4 days ago in Singapore. True. So good to see you again. Thank you. You must be as tired as I am. All right, so please, Cole, unique perspective from you.
Crawford, founder and CEO of Vapor.io, former US West, former Quest Communications. Grew up in the telco industry, in the data center industry, worked in that world. Before they were called co-location companies, and when I was working in them, they were called application service providers, if you remember those. I think what we see from Vapor, and if you Google tower data centers, it's Vapor that comes up. But that aside, I think what you're seeing is a shift in power back towards the telcos. Scott McNeely from Sun Microsystems launched an NFL ad campaign in 2008, and he said the network is the computer. Sun Microsystems said the network is the computer. And they were right. They were a decade too soon. And the question I think we should be asking ourselves in context of telco rising is, what is the network? Is it licensed spectrum? Is it unlicensed spectrum? Is it glass in the ground? The MNOs covet that spectrum. I don't know about people in this room, but I've replaced my television, I've replaced my phone, I've replaced my alarm clock, I've replaced pretty much everything that I do media-wise on licensed spectrum today. And despite what we think the applications for a post-5G world look like, let's assume that we're wrong, because generally humans are bad at predicting innovation. But what we can assume is some millennial is thinking about some new application, some very low latency application, some end user termination technology that will see the value of a post-5G telco world driving the next generation experiences that will be powered by data centers core to edge.
So, Eddie, one of the things is that the cloud has been transformative, it's also been disruptive. The edge has been transformative, and it's been wonderfully disruptive. From your side, Eddie, looking at it from eBay, how people do business in this world. And eBay is more than just people just purchasing goods. It is one of the largest platforms in the world for B2B, B2C, C2C. It is more than most people even begin to understand, as opposed to you just getting your bloody shoes. It's really a platform for the modern era of that connection. How has it changed for eBay with these new requirements where we're no longer sitting at our laptop trying to make the purchase, but you are now talking B2B. You're now talking the devices at the edge. How has it changed for eBay and how you respond to that?
Yeah, so I think it's critical to recognize that a lot of people fact, I don't even know if I'll say this correctly from a marketing perspective, but really eBay is about connectivity, which is no different than a lot of the carriers are. We're connecting buyers and sellers. It doesn't matter whether they're consumer or whether they're business. I was just talking to someone and sharing with them yesterday a 2,000 kVA transformer was sold on eBay, which is kind of a weird thing to see sold on eBay. I just think it's really the majority of our transaction activity now is actually happening through mobile interfaces, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about what do people use to do commerce with, what do people use to do transactional activity, how do they connect, it is embedded into the mobile environment or into environments that are basically not stationary. So I guess for eBay, the key for us is, look, to get more of these folks connected, we have to have that connectivity availability, and then user experience determines whether or not they stay with you or not. So speed is critical, and then the end user experience, the frictionless ability to basically move and act on the transaction, and then for it to be a secure transaction. Those are all the keys on how that works. So if you look at any of the other companies that are in our market space, whether it be Amazon or whether it be Walmart or Alibaba or any of them, all dependent on the same results. And just look at the billions of dollars of transactional activity that occur through just those companies I just named annually. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The transactional amount that's coming through, especially in some of the other players in Asia and in Europe, all ripping off what's happened in America and learning from it. It's beautiful. Alan, I've got to talk to you. How have things changed at the edge for you? You're the guy who's got to deal with millions of people sitting at the edge, frustrated, especially in traffic on the BQE. Sorry.
Well, Crown doesn't really, we don't have to deal with the end user. It's our carrier customers that have to deal with
So your customers.
So ultimately, though, that does drive to us. Now, we've always been a passive infrastructure player, and then that's been our sweet spot. But the world is changing, obviously, on an exponential basis, and the big things we understand that we need to help solve for the latency and the data ingest. And we believe that our distributed real estate plus our fiber can help solve that issue. And so we are looking at how to deploy ultra-low latency fiber networks. And a lot of that is around where our sites are, and we're working with Vapor.io on deploying the small, high-density data centers at tower sites. The big question is the algorithm on where to select the site.
Right.
What drives a prime site? Not only do you have to have location near a substation, location near fiber, but can we design a fiber network that where we can come out and guarantee certain levels of latency, which I think ultimately gets to your question, right? If somebody has a connected car or an AR application, the forgiveness in terms of latency is a lot lower than in the past, and that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely, and you are the edge, truly at it. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful. But when the Tesla car next to me starts taking up all the bandwidth, I'll be out with my baseball bat. Right? Cole, I got to jump to you. I'm sorry to jump over Cliff and Tony, but I got to jump to you because he mentioned it. We're talking about what's coming at the edge in terms of requirements, in terms of equipment, in terms of delivery, in terms of speed, latency, throughput. What have you got to say? Because I know that's what Vapor's working with right now.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny, the cloud or at the edge, first off, we keep talking in the last 2 days, we've talking about, core edge. I mean, this whole thing is Colo, cloud to edge. It doesn't have to be this or that. It can be this and that. The edge is a gradient. The edge augments the core. But when we're specifically talking about the telcos and you look at Crown's assets, you look at the tower assets in general, and you're now geographically optimized for these very low latency capabilities. And the edge in a CRAN, which is the centralized RAN deployment, CRAN 1.0, virtualize the remote radio unit, that's going to continue progressing. And soon we'll be virtualizing the BBU, and then we'll be virtualizing the Evolved Packet Core. There's a bunch of stuff that gets virtualized at the edge. And the question isn't about how you manage 40 sites. I mean, zero offense to anybody with 40 sites. It's how you manage 40,000 sites, because that's Crown's tower footprint. So that humans don't scale with that. You don't solve for that by putting a person in front of an Excel spreadsheet. You have to algorithmically start doing site selection. You have to algorithmically start building in your N+1 resiliency or your 2N resiliency, and you get into a conversation around what I call edge native applications. Just like we have cloud native applications today, in edge native applications, the service level agreement that you'll have with the customer look less like an MLA associated with a tower lease at the top via base station lease and more like a data center lease at the bottom, in the form of cross connects and meet me rooms and 5 nines of uptime. And you will select your risk profile as one part of an application requirement where latency, throughput, QoS, et cetera, are also factors across a far more geographically distributed data center footprint.
True. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
Eddie,
just
go
want
in.
to add, if I could challenge this entire room, particularly the telecom industry, look, if what you're showing consumers and businesses, your map of coverage today is still relevant to you, I think that you're missing the point. Because businesses that really rely on connectivity, and you can name all the hyperscale companies, they've decided to move on without waiting for the telecoms. So the key is how do you get back into being relevant to the connectivity and ubiquity of connectivity? And I think that that's a major factor. And the only way you can scale to that is to deploy, virtualization in a way that gives you the dynamic orchestration you need to deliver, business where it needs to be connected. So
it's the immovable object versus the unstoppable force conversation.
True. Cliff, this is something that you guys have done so well, is actually respond to the application demand, respond to the cloud demand, respond to the requirements inside the business community and the data center community. Cliff, please help us here. This is something that few people understand, that telecom is rising, but it's companies like yours that are truly grabbing it where it needs to deliver. So thoughts, please.
So I agree with everything that's been said so far. And for us, we're, again, just to narrow the focus, we're really looking at enterprise customers and delivering carrier services to those enterprise customers across a carrier-neutral and agnostic platform, all right? So although we are not currently deployed with SDN and NFV and the other acronyms that we need to make all that happen in the future world of self-subscription and usage-based billing, we are putting the foundation blocks in place to do that, right? So we can build fiber. We own our own fiber network. We have data center assets now that are on the edge. We have expertise in carrier Ethernet, wavelengths, fiber deployment and design. And probably equally importantly, we have a core competency around carrier management and our ability to work with carriers, because we're a wholesale provider currently, and we're morphing into this new kind of edge provider servicing the enterprise customers. But from our perspective, in the edge, being focused on the enterprise world, what's lacking there is the economics to make the deployment of in-building wireless work. And this is exactly what we've cured or figured out. So I'm not going to go into too much of the detail on how our business model works, but this is something that we're working with landlords and with carriers and with our investors as well. Because what we want to do is capture that building for long term. Just like our friends at Crown capture AT&T for 20, 25 years of lease term, we want to start capturing those enterprise buildings on a similar type of term.
It's a moving target also. Being in New York, you've got a moving target. I mean, some of the customers inside the building themselves are changing. I moved from 125 Park over to 1185. I had Pandora in one building that completely changed our network. I moved over to Spotify in the other building. They are radically, so your customers, Cliff, are they also changing the dynamics of the business market also for telecom and edge and cloud?
So first of all, you make a good point. Moving targets are harder to hit, so that's helpful, right? But it's not so, our customers are morphing from the enterprise users who typically would acquire an Ethernet circuit for 1 to 3 years to now they want to have that Ethernet circuit available to them for an afternoon, right? So we have a business that's based on, creating value by having long-term customer contracts. So what we're looking to do is transition those long-term customer contracts to someplace else, and we feel that the best place to do that is with the landlords and building owners.
Yeah.
But we'll still maintain those customers. You see, the thing is, the beauty of it is if we put our system into one of these buildings and a customer moves out, there's a good likelihood that they can take us with them to the next place. But we still stay in the building.
Hand up, yes, absolutely, positively. I didn't move buildings. I moved buildings to make sure that I actually had the same telecom provider because of our requirements for VPNs. Tony, you created the home for the cloud that wasn't the hyperscales. Let's be honest here. TierPoint is designed for the cloud player. It is designed for it. Can you talk us through how important is that telecom access for you and cross-connectivity, but at the same time, the demands of your clients, because you have so many?
Yeah, so I think it's critically important for us to partner with the likes of Crown and Cliff and Vapor and many others out there, because having access in and out of our facility is the most important thing to our customer base. So, and diversity. So as we continue to virtualize people's environments via the cloud, the critical and most important piece of that is how fast and what the latency is going to be coming in and out of our facilities. I think we're morphing to more of how do we go beyond where we are today and what the next step is. And obviously, as Cole was talking about, the micro data centers and things that are happening, we need to pay attention to that, and obviously, where connectivity is going to take us. I think it's important for us, and to me, the way I look at this from a go-forward standpoint is who you're going to be partnering with. And I think developing, so we are primarily looking at, the data center space and the managed space, but, our go-to is really not going to be providing, and we are not a cable provider, we are not a network provider. So ensuring that we have these partnerships, because our customer base is looking for diversity, and they're also looking for a cost-efficient way to get in and out of our facility. The biggest challenge that we're seeing today is, the competitive nature of this environment. I mean, we continue to see prices continue to drop, and it is both from the hyperscalers to people of our size, or I should say, providers of our size, and I think that that's going to continue to run pervasively through this. As we move and gravitate to the edge and become much more of a partner with some of the folks that are looking to, as autonomous vehicles grow and as augmented reality and virtual reality grow, we need to be partnered with these folks because we can't handle that critical data that's going to be passed. Virtual reality, I'm not sure it's critical, but it's critical to the youth today. But I think it's important that we're able to pass that with very low latency, and I think that is a direction that we're headed, and we all need to ensure that we're able to, from a bandwidth, to have that traffic is going to be critical to pass.
Tony, I wanted to ask you one other item that came up. You're both in Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities, but you're really seeing tremendous growth in the Tier 2 cities, tremendous requirements, demands, and you've taken an area that many people have forgotten. Has that been critical for you also in terms of that being at the edge in the Tier 2 and the fact of your connectivity is so critical to them also?
I think the majority of the requirements that are coming in today are obviously are regional based in terms of, but as we see a gravitation to more of the IoT, the AV, the AR, we're going to see the Tier 2 data centers and Tier 2 plays will be much more relevant because latency is going to continue to be, and I think from Crown's perspective, probably in the rural areas, they're going to be more and more important because everything's going to be run via your handheld or whatever it might be. We had in our Oklahoma City data center last week, we had the head of data analytics for the Thunder come speak. And they were talking about how the mass amount of data and applications that they run to effectively figure out what each person comes in and does. If they buy a hot dog, if they're downloading. And I think that connectivity that's running not just in Oklahoma City, but 20, 30, 40, 50 miles outside is going to be hugely important as we continue to grow.
So true. Are there any questions? Does anyone throw up a question, or can I throw out the last one for the day on this panel?
I have a question,
Please.
since I'm an end user. Right?
Yes.
So I guess my question is typically as an end user, I carry costs or capitalization costs for the dedicated services or circuit that is delivered to me. I guess the main thing I keep asking is, it's grossly underutilized. And when I look across all of your portfolio, it's usually grossly underutilized, except for during peak periods of some demand traffic or densification activity that goes on, like at sporting events or something. How does the carriers or the non-regulated carrier environments, how do they work towards providing cooperative capital sharing, and so, as opposed to doing it the way we do it today? So,
I'll take that.
Please,
I mean,
Alan.
that's Crown Castle's business model, and that's where the carriers, to their credit, have been very good at deploying the CapEx and building these networks and so forth. Connectivity is being commoditized, and so they're looking for new value-added services, cloud services, and so forth. And so where we come in is the ability to share that infrastructure and allow them to focus their CapEx on higher value investments. And so what we're looking to do is be able to provide that almost the interconnected edge,
Right.
where they can start to hand off and maybe even help to drive a lot of the backhaul cost and a lot of the inefficiencies in the backhaul cost down. So that's what we're trying to do.
Us too. I mean, that's our model. It's shared infrastructure, carrier neutral. It's the only way that this is going to happen, because the capital required for it is just enormous. The edge, I mean, that's the biggest part of the network. The biggest part of the spend is always on the edge. The long haul piece is nominal by comparison. It's the edge, which, especially with densification, is going to be more capital spent in the next 5 years than
Right.
and has ever been spent in telecom history, I believe. Someone said at one point, I heard. It's crazy amounts of money. Yeah.
And I'm very quickly, Cliff, to Eddie's point, almost to a stranded asset base, there is none for you. You can't live in the world of a stranded asset because you don't know when you're going to be turning the next one up. So you're almost thinking in terms of the capacity requirements at the edge and cloud for your customer before your customer knows.
Well, yeah, well, that's what we do in telecom anyway. I mean, we've got decades of experience doing that. We do demand studies, demand forecasts. You look at when you max out a capacity at like 80% or 60% to start renewing that capacity. So this is common practice for us.
Tony, this is your land.
I'm excited to hear Alan thinking that he's going to help us fund new projects. That's great. Makes me happy.
Really well.
And Cliff can help out there too. Look, I think we're going to continue to partner as we move forward. It is, as I mentioned, you sort of have cloud networks, wireless, and if you don't collaborate today and share costs across the board, you're not going to be effective. And look, our customers continue to ask for astronomically low rates. So if we are not sharing costs, we're all going to bear the burden.
True. Cole, final word is to you, actually.
Yeah, and I will kind of keep on the theme. If you look at, say, Verizon and the data center sale that they did to Equinix and the MSP sale, their managed service provider, to IBM, what Wall Street rewards an MNO today might be different than what it rewards MNO in the future for. Today it might be a dividend returned. Tomorrow it might be paying off debt. And what we know for a fact globally is margins for that spectrum as a subscriber are going away. So I think the MNOs are there's a forcing function that is happening for them both technologically in the form of things like NFV. You might think NFV came from a hyperscale telco company. SDN came from a hyperscale telco company. VNFs, virtual network functions, came about from the MNOs who were looking to do network slicing, who were trying to monetize the big fat dumb pipe that they buy, lease, et cetera, from the fiber providers. It's an interesting thing what we're seeing with the MNOs specifically around how they're building the network of the future, and they're seeing innovation in software, they're seeing innovation in capital reduction, which actually benefits everybody on this panel in the form of experiences they can offer at lower costs. Remember, data centers are a margins-based business, right? They're always a margins-based business. And companies like Crown, companies like TierPoint, Equinix, there are IRS vehicles dedicated in the form of REITs, right? In the form of being a real estate investment trust. There are vehicles where that type of capital can be deployed more efficiently in a multi-tenant neutral host way. As far as what we see and as far as what I think that the street will reward for the MNOs of the future is do what you do best. Right? The cloud came about because enterprises shouldn't be building data centers, owner-operated data centers, unless you're at the scale where that makes sense. If you're not at that scale, do what you do well. And I think the MNOs would best be served by letting others deploy the generators, fiber, rack space, HVACs, the critical environment facilities infrastructure, so they can continue building out their network.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you all very, very much. Appreciate it. Round of applause for our panel.